You should stop trying to fix your weaknesses and instead apply design thinking to exploiting your strengths. That is the conviction of John Coyle, my guest today on Construction Genius. John knows a lot about focusing on strengths because as a young man, he identified what his specific athletic strengths were and exploited those to become a world-class athlete in 2 sports and an Olympic silver medalist. So John knows what he's talking about. He also took that thinking and applied it to his business and the businesses that he's been involved in. And so this is a framework of thinking that works not just for sports, but also in business. And it works not just for individuals, but also for teams. And in our discussion today, we talk about why we're so obsessed with our weaknesses, how to separate our ego from reality when we're defining our strengths, how to narrowly define those strengths, and then how to go building our activities and our contribution around those strengths. And we apply it, again, not only to individuals, but also to teams. In the show notes, there's links to John's website, so you can go and learn more about him, and his book, which is called Design for Strengths, Applying Design Thinking to Individual and Team Strengths. And you can find that book on Amazon, so I encourage you to check that out as well. And I appreciate you listening to Construction Genius today. Enjoy my conversation with John. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. John, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thank you, Eric.
You do a lot of work in your speaking and consulting around designing for strengths and really putting a halt to fixing weaknesses. Why are you so convinced that this is an important thing for leaders to lay hold of?
Well, we are programmed, and I would say operationally conditioned, if you want to get back to your Skinner box, to fix weaknesses from childhood. And there's a good reason that we program our kids to do this, because we don't know when we're kids what we're good at and what we're not good at. And kids they're willing to quit anything, right? My daughter was willing to quit basketball after about 4 minutes of the first practice. But you don't get good at something overnight. So we condition our kids to never give up, never give in, never quit. Quitters never prosper. Good things come to those who wait. And that's all great advice until it's not. Or as a quote I heard recently, if you're over 25 and still trying to fix your weaknesses, that ship has sailed.
Interesting. Okay, let's explore that then. So first, we don't know what we're good at. Do some people go through their whole lives and never really figure this out?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is like my constant nightmare. It's what both keeps me up at night and also keeps me inspired. It's a quote from Thoreau: "Most men live lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them."
Okay.
That happens to a lot of people because they don't figure out that one thing that lights them up and makes them on fire, because I think they're so conditioned to never give up, never give in, that they settle for doing something they're okay at.
Okay, let's explore that then. I do want to think about first this idea of what if I don't know? What if I lack clarity on what I'm really good at? And how do I frame understanding what I'm good at in my own mind and then communicating it to other people?
Yeah. Well, so, you got to keep trying stuff when you're a kid.
Okay.
Great conditioning, and we should be doing that. Done right, you start to hone in on the things that light you up. And there's a harbinger of being in your core strengths, or the flow state, if you're familiar with that.
Right.
So the flow state comes about when you're doing your very best work. And and that's the peak performance zone or the zone. But when you get into the zone or the flow state, one of the biggest hallmarks is that all of your metrics for measuring time disappear.
Right.
And so you say something like, "Oh my God, where'd those 3 hours go?" Or time stopped, or both, because when you're not measuring time, you don't actually have any sort of way to enunciate what just happened. That's a great piece of string to draw a thread through in your life. And you start to say, all right, when did time stop or when did time disappear? What was I doing? I needed to be doing more of that. It might be a sales call, it might be spreadsheeting, it might be Excel, it might be writing, it might be negotiating, whatever those things are. But the tough part is that true weaknesses tend to be quite broad and true strengths tend to be very specific. So I'll give you an example from my world and we'll get into it, I know, but
Yep.
I am bad at almost everything athletically, almost everything.
Right.
I have no hand-eye coordination. I'm basically a T-Rex of a human being. It's lucky I can feed myself. I can't play golf. I can't play tennis. I can't play ping pong. I can barely swim, though I grew up on a lake. I have no endurance, so I can't do anything that lasts longer than a minute. Yet I managed to win a silver medal in the Olympics. So how did that happen?
Uh-huh.
So all those things I'm bad at, here's my one little superpower as an athlete. I'm good at the following. Generating a lot of power with my legs against resistance while traveling at high speeds, balancing, turning only left with a group of people trying to kill me. That describes two sports, short track speed skating and velodrome cycling, the two sports I've gone to the World Championships and then the Olympics in.
Interesting. So let's explore that a little bit more. Weaknesses are broad, strengths are narrow.
Yes.
And yet when I think about the typical job description that, let's say, a project manager or a superintendent or a business development manager has, generally speaking, that's fairly broad. So how can I, on the one hand, focus in on my strengths and yet take care of everything else that's in my role and responsibility?
Well, it gets back to, I think, the difference between strengths and skills.
Mm.
So skill gaps are made to be conquered. You learn a new operating system. You learn how to use Excel. You learn how to use Word. You learn how to get good at PowerPoint. Some people have a weakness in these things, but generally speaking, those are skills for most people. So you conquer skills and you move on. True weaknesses tend to be things like, I don't speak well in front of groups.
Right.
Or I can't handle high pressure situations, or I'm not a creative thinker. I'm a linear thinker. Like these are broader things.
Right.
And so, I'll get into it when we talk about the team benefits of starting to design for these things, but you want to put the right person in the right place for the right job at the right time with their specific set of strengths and that narrow slice, which can allow you to break through when having everybody do the same thing the same way is not going to get you there.
Interesting. So you've got to do a lot of work to get that clarity on what you're good at. I'd like to go back to your Olympic experience.
Yeah.
How did you figure out that particular strength of yours? How long did that take? What was that process?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I was just fast.
Right.
That's all I knew. What I didn't realize, I was fast only in short distance events requiring huge, I didn't know that part. So I kept getting confounded when I ran cross country for a year and I sucked at it and I didn't know why. I couldn't figure this out. I'm like, I'm fast. Why am I not fast running cross country? And so the process began to be iterative, that I started to slowly figure out the venues, time frames, types of sports that I was truly good at. And but I still hadn't figured it out. I was in college and I was going to Stanford in California with no coach, no training program. And by my senior year, I still managed to get 12th place in the world in the sport of speed skating.
Right.
Almost no ice time. And so I graduated and I joined the Olympic team.
Mm-hmm.
In my head, I was going to go from 12th to 6th to 1st in the 2 years I had to prepare for the next games.
Right.
And all the support, the coaches, the best in the world. And they put me on a program of fixing my weaknesses, which, as it turns out, are many and varied. I did everything they said. And I went from 12th to 34th.
Interesting.
And not even making the team 2 years later, finishing 30th in the US trials, which I had won 2 years prior.
Interesting.
And I was miserable. I was living the life of quiet desperation. So this is when both design thinking and a master coach I had, their advice sort of came together. Design thinking suggests if you're struggling solving a problem, you're probably solving the wrong problem.
Mm.
And I started thinking to myself, I'm fixing my weaknesses all day, every day. My former coach, where I excelled, always said, race your strengths. And I'm racing my weaknesses. Why am I doing that?
Mm.
So I quit the team, not the sport.
Right.
And I designed a training program and a technique that leveraged my strengths of anaerobic power. And so I tracked this all by myself for an entire year. I didn't race at all until the 1 year from that same race where I got 30th. And in my sport, by the way, the margins of victory are tiny. They're
Right.
100 seconds.
Yep.
So even a small improvement can mean big things. So I showed up for the first race. I'm nervous. I don't know if it's going to work because I haven't had anybody time me for a year. And in my first race back, I broke the US record by 5.5 seconds, the world record by over a second. I went on to break every single US record back to back, race to race, won the entire meet, and went on to the world championships where I set the world record in the 500 meters as well.
Okay, so how can I then translate that into my life? What should I be looking to do? Because I get that concept. Don't race your weaknesses, race your strengths. It took a lot of courage, I would imagine, to be able to step out of that environment that you were in, question what was being done, and go your own way. So how can someone who's in a leadership role, or let's say in a construction company, and they want to excel, what can they do to implement some of those ideas that you implemented?
Well, I'll lend you my favorite cocktail hour question, which is, what are you best at?
Right.
If you can't answer that, well, then you're not going to break through to the next level until you can.
Yes.
And so, and it's subtle stuff, right? Like, I didn't know until I was in my mid 40s that I'll tell you my other strength, because I only have two.
Yeah.
I have the going fast, turning left thing.
Yep.
My other one is taking relatively complex concepts, turning them into metaphors and sharing them as stories.
Yes.
That's my only two strengths. That's all I got. But that's very specific, right?
Yep.
That doesn't make me a great consultant. It doesn't make me a great coach, but it makes me a pretty decent speaker and workshop leader.
Yep.
So the question is, what is your superpower when you're at work? If you don't know your superpower, you don't get to put on the cape. So even if you're in the construction business, it might be leading people in a way that leaves them inspired and wanting to do better. It might be seeing the complex construction patterns and finishing projects early or on time, or always on time, or always under budget. There's so many different facets of that.
So should I trust? So for instance, as soon as you say, what is your superpower, then, there's this assessment I could take, or that assessment I could take. Should I trust assessments, or do I just need to ask myself and answer as honestly as possible a series of questions? I mean, that's one question. What is your superpower? What's another great question I might ask myself to try and narrow down what it is that I'm good at?
If you're early in the phases, I'd say, take things like Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder and some of those. They're really blunt instruments, but they'll get you at least directionally, starting to understand. If you're a high introvert, you're not going to be probably leading a sales meeting unless you can put on a performer hat, in which case you might. I'm an introvert. Some introverts are really good in front of stages. They're just generally not good more one-on-one. Then the next step I would say is, ask yourself hard questions. What am I great at? When do I get in the flow state? What's that narrative that fits through that? And then that probably the hardest one, but maybe the best one of all, and maybe it should come last, is ask the 10 people that know you best. What are my top 5 strengths? What are my top 5 weaknesses? And here's the magic about this world is I am an anaerobic athlete. I can generate lots of power. The cost of entry for being an anaerobic athlete is I am a terrible aerobic athlete.
Right.
Almost every strength has a corresponding cost of an associated weakness. If you are a direct, honest person, you are also blunt and rude. If you are a big picture strategist, you're probably terrible with details. If you're creative, you're probably disorganized. If you're practical, you're probably critical. If you're detail oriented, you're probably a perfectionist. I could go on and on. The cost of entry for a true superpower is its inverse. And that's the thing you got to design around. You don't throw a big picture strategist into a PMO organization.
Right.
You don't. You got to use people's strengths when the appropriate time is right. And don't try to force fit a round peg into a square hole. It will never work.
So that then leads us to another aspect of our conversation. Let's say I've identified my strengths as an individual. And again, I do want to make this emphasis. It's typically for most people extremely narrow, and there's one or at tops 2 things that are really a true strength.
Yep.
How can I take this concept that you're describing now and not only apply it to my life as a leader, but this is critical in construction, in putting together teams of people in order to execute what it is that we do?
Yeah, great question. I'll answer it 2 ways. I used to lead a marketing team, and there was the 28 people on the team. 8 of them were managers. The 8 managers were all marketing managers. They just had regions. They were same job, different location, same job description. Therefore, logically, I made them do the same things, right? They all had to do sponsorships, communications, promotions, research. Like, they had to do the same things because that's what the job description said. And that's what was also fair. And fair really gets into this a little bit. Then I started reading about StrengthsFinder and sort of uncovering my own story. And I was like, wait a minute. I've got 2 people who are really great communicators. I've got 2 people that are really great program managers. I've got two people that are really creative. And I've got 2 people who are really good with people in general. So I rejiggered the team. This was, by the way, completely unfair and not the job description.
Right.
So I had 2 sponsorship managers. I had 2 PMOs. I had 2 relationship managers. I had 2 creatives that managed the ad teams. And our performance went through the roof because people got to do what they did best rather than what the job description told them to. I'll give you another example from the Olympics. We go to the Olympics. There's 4 guys on the relay team. It's the final event of the Winter Olympics. And I'm the anchor because I have the fastest lap times. And you always want to skate your fastest person last, right? Mm-hmm. Until we get there and we're skating on figure skating ice, which is soft and slow and thick. And I'm pretty big for my sport. Like, Apollo was 5'6", 135 pounds. I'm 6 foot, 175 pounds. So
right.
I'm struggling. And so the night before the gold medal round, we sit down as a team to decide who of the 4 of us is going to skate the anchor leg. And the coach is like, well, you're out. And I already knew it. Like, I couldn't do it. And then they're like, all right, Andy Gable, you have the second fastest times, but you're too big too. It's not going to work for you. Randy Bartz, you can skate on snow. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be awful. Maybe we should skate you. But Eric Flame, youngest, newest member of the team with the least experience, also the lightest with the best endurance. Eric, we're going to skate you for our anchor leg because you're the right person for this job.
Right.
So out there, ice is terrible. Race is just a race of atrophy. And Eric comes out for his final exchange, a big smile on his face because he doesn't get tired. Passes his way from bronze to silver, almost catches gold. Another half lap, we'd have had gold because we put the right person in with the right skill set for the right job at the right time. We hire for a diversity of experience, background, and skills. And then if we make everybody do the same thing the same way, we've just wasted all that work.
So that's interesting because what you're saying there is that a team's configuration and where you place people can change from project to project or opportunity to opportunity.
You know, IDEO, my mentor in college is a guy named David Kelly, and he's the CEO of a company called IDEO. They're an innovation consulting firm, and they help companies assemble what they call hot teams.
Right.
When there's a new project to be built, they assemble people with all the right skills for whatever that thing is, and it's level independent, which I find fascinating. Right? It might be the most junior member, but if that's the right person who has inside knowledge of whatever this thing is, they should be on the team.
So that's interesting. So if I'm going to be able to put together a team that exploits people's strengths, that means that I'm going to have to ask perhaps some senior people to park their egos from time to time.
Right. Yeah, they don't decide. The person with the most insider knowledge for whatever that thing is should be the decision maker. Military has also adopted this.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting. So how do I, when we're growing up and our parents sometimes, particularly if you're like a Gen Xer and you got raised by baby boomers or even the Gen Xers who are raising their own kids, they spend a lot of time praising their kids. And one of the complaints that I hear from folks is I get these people in my organization and they think they're good at everything and they just got this massive ego. Number one, how do I separate my own ego from my actual strength? And number two, how do I help somebody else to identify those strengths and park their own egos?
Yeah, it's really hard to let go of the ego. I mean, I had all the data in the world in front of me that I was a terrible aerobic athlete for years, and I just ignored it. I mean, I took a test. I took an aerobic threshold test. I scored the worst score of anybody on the team by a wide margin. And you know what I said? There's something wrong with the test, the doctor, the bike, something. Clearly, that's not me.
Yeah.
And then I took this test 3 more times and I scored the same each time. So it is, we're wired to try to be perfect at everything. The moment, though, that you can say, you know what? I'm going to show up as the real me, and the real me is good at these things and is bad at these things, it is like a sandbag off your shoulders. Like
Right.
life just gets immediately better. My very first job, I was a PMO at Goldman Sachs. There was no worse job in the world for me.
Right.
But, you know, I wanted to succeed and I worked my ass off, and I got a partially meets expectations after killing myself for a year.
Yep.
And it took a big blow to the ego to say, you know, maybe I'm not good at everything. And then I went to the consulting manager that was my boss, and I said, I don't think I should probably be in another PMO project. I think I'm more of a creative thinker. And it was like his face lit up. He was like, totally, that makes perfect sense. They don't want you to fail. They don't want you to be doing stuff you hate.
Right.
They want you to be doing the stuff that you love. So I did that repeatedly through my career. I stayed with the same company for 8 years, but I quit my job 4 times.
Yeah, right.
In following fashion. I said, hey, boss, you know, I know I'm the marketing manager and I'm leading all of these operations, but I'm not really an operations person. I'm more a strategic person. Do you think there's a role in strategy? And he's like, that makes sense. You know, not right now, but in 6 months. In 6 months, I'm in strategy, and I'm in strategy for a year and a half. And I'm like, you know, this is a lot of data and analytics. I go to my boss, you know, I'm not really a data and analytics guy. I'm kind of more on the creative side. So let's put you in the brand team and so forth. So you can navigate your world to TikTok and parallelogram your way to the place where you finally get to do what you do best. And when you do that, man, people love it.
So there's 2 things I'm hearing from this is, number one, if I'm early in my career, I got to be willing for that iterative process that you just described. And then if I'm in a senior place of leadership, I need to have that openness to have those conversations with people who perhaps are coming to me and saying, I'm not good at this, but I am good at that. And then even noticing what people are good at so that I might be able to put them in the right positions.
Absolutely. And they won't know. This is the hard part. And so this is the hard conversation. But I've fired 8 people in my career.
Uh-huh.
And 7 of them are good friends. Because the conversation, I didn't do it like once, right? The conversation repeatedly was, hey, do you really think this job is a fit with your actual core skill set and native talents? And the first answer always is absolutely. I'll work harder. I'll figure it out. And then we have the conversation again in 20 days. And no, I'm still I'm committed. I'm going to make this work. And then 60 days in, they're like, I'm struggling. I admit I am struggling. And then 80 days in, they're like, you know what? Maybe this isn't a fit for me. And then we put the performance plan together. And 30 days later, they're out and they find the job that meets their expectations, and they meet their expectations, and they're happier and everybody's better off. The one person never did that, but 70.
It's interesting, though, because many times when someone is poorly performing, it can be easy to make sort of moral judgments about them in terms of their character, thinking this person is a bad person, when in fact, they may be a very good person, except they're just in the wrong position.
My experience is 80% of the time, they're just in the wrong position. 15% of the time, they've got other stuff going on we don't know about.
Yeah.
And 5% of the time, it's something else.
Yeah. That 15%, by the way, is something to always keep in mind, because sometimes you've got those performers who they seem to fall off a cliff and you're wondering what's going on, but it's because there's some stuff happening in their lives, you know? Let me ask you this. I think this is something that people struggle with. Let's say I have a sneaky suspicion that I'm really good at something, and I may even have a particular clarity around it, and others have maybe noticed it. But what if I lack the courage to actually step out and do that thing?
Yeah. You know, I'll answer with a quick story. When I left the team to train on my own, nobody wanted that to happen. I had calls from coaches, parents, skaters. I was called the wild child, the rebel, and the one that hurt the most, the non-team player.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm off training on my own. And this, you know, they still allowed me to be a national team member, which I don't know if that'd even be allowed these days. But so I'm off training on my own, and I'm hearing all these rumblings. So 6 weeks after leaving the team, I decided to join the team for just 1 week at Lake Placid for a training camp.
Right.
So I show up. And I'm trying this new technique, but I haven't mastered it yet. And I'm out on the ice with the team. We do a 2-hour session. And then after the session, as I'm putting my skate guards on, the coach skates over and he's like, hey, John, I'm sorry, but the coaches and skaters have voted and you have to go home.
Right.
So my own team voted me off the island. But for me, that was actually a really profound moment, because that inspired me every day after that to show up and practice on my own, because it's hard to practice on your own. Yeah. So departing from the status quo requires a lot of conviction. But when you can get into the flow state doing the thing you do, you kind of stop caring what other people think, which is a really powerful place to be. I just didn't care anymore. I was going to do my thing and see how it worked out.
And did you have anyone supporting you in that? So you had all the naysayers, but was there anyone sort of standing by your side?
Well, that's where I'm extraordinarily lucky to have two parents that were unequivocally supportive of whatever I decided to do.
Huh.
So they always were 100% behind me. And they're like, if that's what you think is right, then you should definitely do that. And so, kudos to my parents for being there.
That's encouraging. So let's just summarize into some action items here. How do I find my strength, and how do I start designing around those strengths?
Yeah. So I'll quickly cover the design thinking process in order to answer that. So design thinking has essentially 5 steps, sometimes 6, but we'll go with 5. First, you have to accept that there's a problem. And in this case, accept that you have weaknesses. We talked about that already. If your head is in the sand and you don't want to admit that you have weaknesses, well, then we're not moving forward from there.
Yep.
As Dave Evans from Stanford puts it, if your problem is with your problem, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Second step is to define your strengths. So accept first, then accept your weaknesses, define your strengths specifically, as specific as possible, iterative over time. And you're always going to keep honing in closer. Then you need, in this case, to have empathy for yourself. Mourn your loss of all those lost non-strengths.
Yep.
And accept, this is how I show up. If you're a direct, honest, blunt, rude person, one of the best ways to do this, by the way, is just share with people, this is how I show up. I had a coworker once tell me, hey, John, I'm sorry. I'm kind of an asshole. And I was waiting for the punchline. I thought it was a joke. He's like, I just say whatever comes into my head. I have no filter. Right. I'll probably make you mad in meetings. I just want to let you know in advance. And we grew to love this guy because we knew what to expect from him. And we called him eventually the salty truth teller of the team. And we'd bring him in meetings just to tell the truth, So people are quite forgiving of your weaknesses if they know the corresponding strength.
Right.
So that's the empathy piece. And then only then you start ideating, where should my career go from here? Where should my team go from here? How should we do things different? How can we structure for my strengths, for the team's strengths? What does that future look like? And you got to test, prototype, and repeat, which is the 5th stage of design thinking, because you're not going to get it right the first time. But accept, define, have empathy, ideate, and test and prototype.
Excellent. Now, I know you have a book out called Design for Strengths, Applying Design Thinking to Individual and Team Strengths. Do you dive into this process in that book?
I sure do. Yeah, I get into it real deep in terms of each of the steps. And I give examples for each of the steps, both from business and from sports. Sports are really lovely, and that's just simpler than real life.
Yes.
So that's where the sports analogies work really well. But the other thing I was really blessed to do is to have 14 design thinking experts, including David Kelly, Tom Kelly, and others, contribute their thoughts to the book. So you'll get the advice of 15 experts.
That's excellent. So I'm going to link to that book both on John's website and also the Amazon link. And you can get that book on hardcover, Kindle, or paperback. Is that out on Audible too?
No, I haven't read it yet.
Okay. Terrific. So John, as we're wrapping up here, how can someone get in touch with you? What is it that you do, and how can you help organizations with your practice?
Yeah. So I essentially do keynote speeches and short workshops for a living. I believe the following, that you can affect change in really only 2 ways. One is sharing knowledge, and then long-term practice. And that's the way universities do it. And effective. The shortcut is if you can get people engaged emotionally enough that they want to practice on their own when they learn a new concept, then you've just shortcutted the months and years of practice needed to do so, because they'll do it themselves. So it is possible in an hour keynote or a short workshop to get people engaged enough. If they believe, oh, I can do this too, then they'll change their behavior. If people really, really believe they can double down on their strengths and see increased performance, they'll do so. And so that's what I do for a living. And you can reach me at johnkcoyle.com. And my blogs and everything are there, videos there, 4 TEDx's. So yeah.
That's beautiful. John, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your insights with us.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.
Today's episode was brought to you by the construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.